The stars stretched out before Captain Azael, each one an endless pinpoint of light in the vastness of the universe. Her ship, the Dartwing, sliced through the blackness with unerring precision, its engines humming steadily as it made its way through a sector of space so remote it was considered uncharted. The crew was a unique blend of alien species, each with their own strange abilities and complex history. Yet, despite the diversity, there was something, or rather, someone who had been causing a great deal of commotion lately. Azael glanced over at her first officer, Kthal, a towering Vocarian warrior, who was nervously wringing his massive hands. The problem wasn't the ship, the crew, or the mission. It was the one human on board, Lieutenant Emily Walker. "Captain, I'm not sure how much longer I can do this," Kthal muttered under his breath, his normally strong voice tinged with anxiety. Azael raised an eyebrow, intrigued by his unusual behavior. The Vocarian race was known for their intimidating presence and stoic resolve. But even Kthal seemed rattled by the mere presence of their human crew member. "Are you referring to Lieutenant Walker?" Azael asked, though she already knew the answer. Kthal gave a sharp nod, his eyes narrowing as he looked down at his datapad, clearly distracted. She's different. She's not like the others. Every time she talks, I feel this strange sensation in my chest. I can't focus properly." Azael resisted the urge to laugh. Kthal was certainly a formidable warrior, but it was hard to take him seriously when he was so obviously intimidated by a mere human. Still, there was something fascinating about the lieutenant. Humans were strange creatures, small, fragile, yet capable of incredible resilience and ingenuity. "We'll have to figure out," Azael said, leaning back in her chair. "But she's a necessary part of the crew now, Kthal. We need her skills if we're going to survive the next few weeks." The situation wasn't dire yet, but Azael knew that with the current mission, mapping a newly discovered star system, they would need every hand available. The human, despite her small stature and odd ways, had proven herself capable. Her resourcefulness and sharp problem-solving skills had already saved them during previous missions. However, her presence was also unsettling. Her every action seemed to disrupt the harmony of the crew. The way she spoke with blunt honesty, the way she worked independently. It was as if she didn't need anyone, yet still managed to bring the team together in unexpected ways. But the real problem wasn't just the lieutenant's peculiar behavior. No, the problem was something far more dangerous. Emily Walker, for all her strengths, was terrified of space travel. "Let me go check on her," Azael said. Standing up and moving toward the door, Kthal growled softly, but said nothing as Azael left the bridge. The moment she stepped into the crew quarters, she could hear the unmistakable sound of Emily's quiet sobbing. It was strange how such a small sound could command Azael's attention, but there it was. She knocked twice on the door. "Lieutenant, you all right?" The sobbing ceased immediately, followed by a quiet, "I'm fine, Captain. Just working on something." Azael pushed the door open with a soft creak and stepped inside. Emily was sitting at a small desk in the corner, her hands trembling slightly as she worked on her datapad. Her face was flushed, her eyes red from the tears she had been wiping away. "Is it the stars again?" Azael asked gently, her voice softened by empathy. Emily hesitated for a moment before nodding, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never been so far from Earth. Never seen anything like this before. It's terrifying, Captain." Azael could see it now, the faint unease, the hesitation in her every movement. Despite her calm exterior, Emily was barely holding herself together. She had been hiding it well, but this mission was wearing on her more than anyone realized. "Don't worry," Azael said, pulling up a chair next to her. "You're not alone. We all feel it. Space is vast, lonely, but we have each other. The crew, and me." She paused, giving the lieutenant a reassuring smile. "You're stronger than you know." Emily looked at her, eyes still wet with unshed tears. "I'm not sure I can do this anymore, Captain. I feel like I'm breaking apart." Azael sat in silence for a moment, thinking. She could empathize with Emily's feelings, but the mission required them all to push beyond their limits. No one could afford to break now. not with the unknown dangers lurking out there. "You're not alone in this, Lieutenant," Azale said after a long pause. "We all have our fears, and we all face them in different ways. But you have something others don't: resilience. Humans have an uncanny ability to adapt, to fight through what seems impossible." Emily looked at her with a mix of exhaustion and surprise. Azale had never spoken to her like this before, but it felt necessary. She needed to know that she wasn't alone. The silence stretched between them, but it was no longer uncomfortable. There was a shared understanding now, something that Azale couldn't quite describe. "We're going to get through this," Azale added firmly. "Together." Just then, a strange beeping noise came from the intercom system, cutting through the tension like a knife. The voice of the ship's AI rang out over the speakers, neutral and urgent. "Captain Azale, a distress signal has been detected. Incoming transmission. Priority Alpha." The captain's heart skipped a beat. Distress signal? This far out in uncharted space? It wasn't just unusual, it was dangerous. She exchanged a look with Emily, who immediately straightened in her chair, her earlier hesitation vanishing like mist before the morning sun. "You ready, Lieutenant?" Azale asked, standing quickly. Emily nodded, her fear temporarily forgotten, replaced by the unyielding will to face whatever came next. "Let's do this." And just like that, the mission had shifted from challenging to life-threatening. They were about to face something far beyond their understanding, and the unknown stretched out before them like a vast and intimidating sea. But in that moment, they were ready. The stars no longer felt so cold. The distress signal was faint, cutting to the cosmic hum like a weak, forgotten whisper. Yet, despite the weak transmission, the urgency was undeniable. Azale felt her heartbeat quicken. Something wasn't right. Something wasn't just unusual, it was wrong. She felt it deep in her bones, like a forewarning from the cosmos itself. She turned to Emily, whose eyes now shone with a steely determination. The human had transformed almost instantly from a fragile, anxious lieutenant into someone unrecognizable. Strong, resolute, almost like the person who had saved them from that malfunctioning reactor core 2 weeks ago. "Where's the source of the distress signal?" Azale barked at the ship's AI. "Coordinates locked, Captain. 20 light years away, uncharted system. Signal seems to originate from an unknown source, a derelict ship of unusual design." The AI responded. Its voice was calm, but Azale could detect the faintest hint of tension in its mechanical tone. "Get us there. Now." The Dartwing surged forward, its engines whirring as they accelerated into the unknown. Emily stood tall beside Azale on the bridge, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She had gone quiet, her earlier emotional turmoil now completely masked by the steely focus in her eyes. She was ready for whatever lay ahead. As they entered the outer reaches of the uncharted system, the stars seemed to fade, like a shadow swallowing the light. The galaxy felt vast and oppressive, an endless, dark sea stretching in every direction. They soon reached the coordinates, and what they saw took their breath away. A massive ship, drifting aimlessly, its hull cracked and torn in several places. It was unlike anything Azale had seen before. No known design, no familiar markings. The ship was ancient, its structure showing signs of decades, possibly centuries, of neglect. It resembled a hybrid of several alien technologies, with jagged, organic curves running along its hull. In its silent, lifeless drift, it seemed like a ghost, a remnant of some long-forgotten civilization. "Prepare a boarding party," Azale ordered. "Thal, I want you on the front lines. Lieutenant Walker, you're with me. We're going in." The Vocarian first officer growled in acknowledgement, his expression unreadable behind his mask. He wasn't exactly thrilled about sharing the mission with a human, especially one who still seemed like she was fighting to survive space travel. But Azale had given the order, and that was all that mattered. As they docked with the derelict ship, an eerie silence filled the air. No sound of life, no signs of activity, just an ominous stillness that seemed to settle over them like a heavy fog. They moved cautiously, weapons drawn, their footsteps echoing to the hollow, abandoned halls of the ship. Azale's heart beat faster with every step, but it wasn't just fear, no, it was anticipation. Something was wrong, and it was a kind of wrong that only an explorer like her could truly appreciate. It was the kind of wrong that hinted at untold mysteries waiting to be uncovered. The further they ventured, the more the ship seemed to take on an unnatural life of its own. Dark corridors stretched endlessly before them, lit only by flickering emergency lights. The walls were lined with alien symbols, some faintly glowing, others worn away by time. It was clear that this ship wasn't just ancient, it was alien, something Azael had never encountered before in all her years of exploration. And then they reached the heart of the derelict vessel. In the center of the chamber stood what could only be described as an artifact, an enormous, pulsating core of energy. It hummed with life, a faint blue glow radiating from its center, its power palpable even from a distance. But it wasn't just the artifact that drew Azael's attention. It was a creature standing near it, its body hunched and elongated, its face covered in shadow. It was unlike anything they'd ever seen. Half machine, half organic, with metallic sheen to its skin. It looked almost human, but the eyes, those eyes, were not human. They glowed with an otherworldly intensity, a color no one could describe. Emily gasped, taking a step back, but Azael held up a hand, signaling for everyone to remain still. "Stay calm," she whispered, her eyes never leaving the creature. She wasn't sure what it was, but one thing was clear. This was no mere survivor of an alien race. This was something far more dangerous. The creature, sensing their presence, tilted its head slightly, as though studying them. Azael could feel a strange pull, a sense of recognition she couldn't quite place. Something about this creature's aura, its energy, felt both familiar and utterly alien at the same time. Before Azael could react, it spoke. Its voice was like a deep, reverberating hum that echoed through their bones. "You are not what you seem, Captain Azael. You bring a human among you. A strange choice." The word sent a chill down Azael's spine. How did this creature know her name? And more importantly, how did it know about Lieutenant Walker? Emily's breath caught in her throat, but she stepped forward, her eyes burning with a quiet fire. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice steady despite the fear Azael knew she must have been feeling. The creature's eyes flickered with something resembling amusement, an emotion Azael had never thought she would see on a being like this. Fear is an illusion, human. The creature's voice deepened, its tone more resonant. "You should fear what comes next. The very thing you sought. The end." As the last word echoed in the chamber, the entire ship shuddered violently, and the artifact at the center began to hum louder, its glow growing blindingly bright. The ship was coming to life. They were trapped, and what lay ahead was beyond anything they had prepared for. The ground beneath their feet trembled as the ship groaned and shifted, its ancient structure groaning under some unseen force. Azael's instincts kicked in, and she shouted, "Everyone, back to the Dart Wing, now!" But it was already too late. The walls around them began to warp and bend, the once sturdy metal stretching like soft clay. Strange, luminescent tendrils erupted from the floors, walls, and ceilings, lashing out like serpents in search of prey. Each one hissed and crackled with energy, sending arcs of electricity flickering through the air. The sound was deafening, a symphony of chaos reverberating through the derelict ship. "We should never have come here," Emily muttered under her breath, eyes wide as she scanned the grotesque, alien landscape unfolding before them. But there was no time for regret. Not now. "Get to the airlock." Azael yelled, her voice laced with authority, her mind racing to come up with a way out of this mess. She turned to Cthal, who was already crouched in a defensive stance, his combat suit glowing faintly as he assessed their situation. "We need to disable the core," Azael said, gesturing toward the artifact. "If we don't, this entire ship could destroy the whole system, and will be caught in the blast." Cthal nodded grimly. "Then we have no choice. I'll hold them off. You and Walker disable the core." Emily gave a determined nod, and the two of them sprinted toward the heart of the ship, leaving Cthal behind to face the oncoming wave of energy tendrils that slithered toward them. He unleashed a barrage of energy blasts from his arm-mounted weapons, each shot disintegrating the tendrils that came within range. But more were coming, faster and stronger, pushing back with relentless force. Azael and Emily reached the artifact, its energy now pulsing like a beating heart. It felt almost alive, and the closer they got, the more Azael felt that strange pull in her chest, the same feeling she had experienced back when she first laid eyes on the creature. The artifact, it seemed, was a conduit to something greater, something beyond their understanding. What are we dealing with here? Emily asked breathlessly, her hands trembling as she examined the complex machinery. It's not just an artifact, Azael replied. It's a sentient energy core, and I'm willing to bet it's controlling the entire ship. They had no time to waste. As Emily tried to access the central control panel, Azael kept her gaze locked on the creature, still hovering nearby. It was watching them, its glowing eyes never leaving their movements. It had said something before, something about the end. Azael had a sinking feeling that this wasn't just about them. It was about something much bigger. The tendrils outside the core room grew more aggressive, and Azael could hear the unmistakable sounds of Cthulhu's plasma rifles firing, mingled with the eerie hum of the energy blasts. He was still holding them off, but for how long? She couldn't rely on him forever. They needed to act fast. Got it, Emily called out, her fingers flying over the control panel as she bypassed the security protocols. She was good, better than anyone Azael had seen when it came to tech. In moments, she had managed to deactivate the core's energy shield. But just as they thought they were safe, the floor beneath them suddenly collapsed, sending them tumbling into darkness. Everything went silent. The world was black for a moment, only to be pierced by the crackling hum of the ship's energy. Azael groaned, her vision blurry as she tried to regain her bearings. Slowly, the light from the core flickered, and she saw Emily, disoriented but unharmed, struggling to stand beside her. What happened? Emily whispered, wiping blood from her forehead. Something's gone wrong, Azael said. This ship's sentient core is more than just a power source. It's alive, and it's reacting to us. As if to prove her point, the walls around them began to shift again. The ship's corridors warped, the metal twisting and turning like a living organism, responding to their every move. They were no longer just in a derelict ship. They were inside something alive. Suddenly, the creature appeared in front of them again, its glowing eyes now burning brighter than ever. It was no longer speaking. Instead, it was broadcasting a pulse, a mental wave that seemed to cut through Azael's mind like a blade. She staggered, gasping for air as the ship's sentience flooded her consciousness. We are one, the voice echoed in her mind. You have come. You are the key. Azael's heart raced as she tried to shake off the mental assault. Emily reached out to steady her, but the creature wasn't done. It was pressing harder now, pushing into their minds. There was no escape. Azael realized the truth. They weren't just facing a derelict ship or a dangerous alien species. They were facing the heart of something ancient, something sentient, that had been waiting for a key. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. The key wasn't just Emily. It was both of them, together. Emily, Azael gasped, we have to disable it together, now. With her mind racing and time running out, Azael drew on every ounce of her strength and willpower, pushing through the pulse that battered her senses. She had no idea how long they had before the creature took full control of their minds and their fates. But there was no choice. On my mark, Azael said through gritted teeth. She reached for Emily's hand, and together they pressed forward. They would either succeed together or perish. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the ship was about to make sure they felt every second of it. The pulse of energy around them intensified, reverberating through the ship like a heartbeat. The walls of the derelict vessel had become more than just steel and metal. They were living, breathing creatures in their own right, alive with the consciousness of the sentient core. The ship, as Azael now realized, was not merely a vessel. It was a symbiotic organism with its own desires and motives. The creature before them, once an entity of mystery, was now nothing less than the guardian of that core, and it seemed determined to make them part of its living structure. Azael and Emily were pinned in the room, surrounded by twisting, writhing tendrils of light. The ship's once orderly halls now bent and warped into impossible angles, creating an inescapable maze. They could feel the alien presence pressing on their minds, a suffocating weight pushing them into submission. Azael's head pounded as the psychic assault continued, the creature's voice echoing inside her mind with growing force. "You are the key. You have come." Emily's eyes widened with panic, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Azael, though feeling the same terror, forced herself to focus. They were here for a reason. They had come to stop this, to end whatever horrific plan the creature had in store for the universe. This ship, this sentient being, was not just a relic of the past. It was an anchor to something much larger, something that could destroy worlds. And now, it was demanding to be freed. "We have to move," Azael whispered, her voice strained. She gripped Emily's hand tightly, trying to steady her as they stumbled through the shifting walls. "Stay focused. We're not out yet." Emily nodded, her determination slowly replacing the fear in her eyes. They had faced impossible odds before, but this was different. This was no mere creature. This was a living entity, a weapon of unimaginable power. And yet, they were still alive, still fighting. They couldn't let it win. They reached the heart of the ship, where the artifact pulsed with a strange, hypnotic light. It stood before them, its surface rippling with energy as though it were alive, breathing. The sentient being's power had intensified, and every step they took toward the core seemed to make the room grow smaller, as if the walls were closing in on them. "This is it," Azael said, her voice a mix of awe and dread. "The core. If we can destroy it, we can shut this ship down." Emily moved to the control panel, her fingers flying over the holographic interface as she attempted to hack into the system. The ship responded violently, tendrils of energy erupting from the walls to block her path. "It's fighting back," Emily said through clenched teeth, sweat dripping down her forehead. "It's not going to let us do this easily." "Then we don't let it," Azael replied, stepping forward and drawing her weapon. She fired at the nearest tendril, the plasma shot sizzling through the air and disintegrating it in an instant. But more were already coming, faster and more aggressive than before. They were trapped in a cage of living metal, the creature's hold tightening around them. Azael turned back to Emily, who was still furiously trying to bypass the security protocols on the control panel. Time was running out. The ship was becoming more unstable by the second, and the creature's mental grip was growing stronger. "Emily," Azael shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "We don't have much time. We need to act now." With a determined nod, Emily pulled out a small device from her pack, a portable EMP disruptor. "This might give us a chance," she said, her hand shaking as she activated it. The device hummed to life, sending out a pulse of energy that temporarily shorted out the ship's systems. The tendrils paused, as if stunned by the sudden interference. It was their chance. Azael bolted forward, using the brief respite to push through the massive tendrils. Her pulse raced as she reached the heart of core, her hand trembling as she prepared to plant the explosive charges that would disable for good. "On my mark," Azael said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. 3, 2, 1. The room shook violently as the creature screamed in agony, its form shifting and contorting as it tried to stop them. But it was too late. Azael pressed the detonator, and the core erupted in a burst of brilliant light. The ship screamed in a cacophony of alien sounds, as if mourning the loss of its power source. The walls around them collapsed, the entire ship disintegrating in the wake of the explosion. Azael's heart pounded as she turned to Emily, grabbing her hand and pulling her toward the exit. The ship was coming apart, but they were still alive. They still had a chance. As they sprinted toward the airlock, Azael could feel the weight of the battle lifting. The ship's hold on them was gone, its power slipping away with each passing second. But the danger wasn't over yet. They still had to escape. The airlock door slid open with a hiss, and they tumbled out onto the rocky surface of the nearby moon. The harsh light of the dying ship illuminated the landscape, casting long shadows over the barren terrain. The ship behind them began to crumble into nothingness, its energy drained, its sentience snuffed out. They were safe. For now, Azael and Emily stood together, panting and bruised, staring at the wreckage of the ship. They had won, but at what cost? The creature was gone, but it had been part of something much larger. something still out there waiting. The universe was a vast and mysterious place, and though they had defeated this particular threat, there would always be another. Azael looked at Emily. Her expression won a quiet determination. We did it, but this isn't over. We're just getting started. Emily met her gaze, her eyes reflecting the same resolve. Whatever comes next, we face it together. And with that, they turned to walk into the unknown, ready to face whatever the universe had in store for them next.